Home isn't just a place, it's a feeling that you're safe to enjoy the things that matter most. ADT lets you take that feeling with you, whether you're at home, your business, or online. We help keep you safe with security systems, home automation, alarms, and surveillance, so you can feel at home wherever you are. Go to ADT.com to get that feeling for less than $1 a day. ADT. Home. Safe home.
Right now in our studio, you never know what he's got cooked up to make us upset. He's the one and only Will Kane is here. Good morning, Will Kane.
That's not my intention.
I don't
But you
understand
do
that.
it so well.
But it always seems to be the result.
Really
Seems
does.
to be my talent.
I take it, though, like we were talking earlier, Greeny went to a lecture just because. And it wasn't
just
school.
because.
Yes, it
I
was
told
just
you,
because.
no, it's not
Whatever.
true.
You went to something to hear
I was
somebody
at
talk.
I was at a retreat, a board retreat, and he was
Whatever.
the speaker.
All right. I wouldn't have gone. You could have skipped it.
Who is the speaker?
Does it matter?
A professor of education who
As I
talks
said,
about something that
the last lecture I went to, I had to write a paper
What's-
about it because I was in school for it. I'm not going to go listen to somebody talk.
Is the word you're looking for boring or is it pretentious?
Not interested. How about that?
Well, I think that's in the boring
It
range.
I don't want
to
to
the
say
boring
boring.
side.
It could lead to that. I shouldn't say that because I'm sure there are some very good speeches or people giving lectures out there, standing at lecterns, as you said.
Yeah, that's why I called it a lecture.
because he was at a lectern.
He got up and spoke. I don't know what else
So
to
if
tell
he didn't
you.
have a lectern, he was just kind of walking back and forth, you would have not called it a lecture?
Well, I mean, I would have called it a speech. It felt like a lecture. He is a professor, and thus is actually a professor of education, and thus it felt like a lecture. It felt like being back in college, but he was talking about a subject that I was extremely interested in, and it was great. So who has to defend this? Why do I have to defend this? It's like sometimes I will read a book. Now, if I may digress, I like reading
Again,
books.
there you go.
That's what I'm saying.
Again with the fancy pants books,
with that
Greeny.
stuff.
I will post, like on my Facebook page, some thoughts on the book that I read, and some of the reaction will be, "Oh, look at Mr.
Right.
Sophisticated
Exactly.
reading books."
Exactly. That's exactly what my
When
post
did
was.
reading a book become something that was criticizable in any way?
Read a book, keep it to yourself, okay?
You can review seeing a movie. You go to a movie, you review the movie.
Yes.
I read a book, I review the book. People mock me. They make fun of me. They're like, "Oh, you think you're so fancy, so smart reading books." I don't know when we crossed over that
Has
line.
nothing to do with you reading
but it's
a
a
book.
bad line.
It's more to do with
Look
you.
at you with the words.
Yeah, look at you reading books. All right, Will Kane, let's get down to the business here. We got a poll question up on our Twitter page at Mike and Mike.
Yes.
You're the Cleveland Cavaliers. You have three options. One of them, keep Kyrie Irving and just force these guys to figure something out. Option number two, trade him for immediate help. Trade him for what you believe will give you the best chance, whatever is out there, to try and win it this year. Or three, trade for the future, for a LeBron-less future that you're probably staring at a year from now. So some combination of young players and draft picks, et cetera. Our audience right now is voting on Twitter. Which one gets your vote?
I don't think any of the options are good. I don't think, and I heard you guys talking earlier this morning, that Cleveland is in a position of strength. I don't like any of these options for Cleveland. So by default, I think option three is the way you have to go. Make a trade that sets you up for a LeBron-less future. And the argument is less that, hey, look how wonderful your options are on trading for draft prospects and first-year stars. It's more, look how bad the first two are. I don't believe, and I've received a lot of heat from people in Cleveland, including, by the way, Ric Flair, who we just had playing with his
Right?
classic speech.
Clap, woo.
That I'm trying to be a realist with Cleveland. I don't think you bring these two guys at this point together and put them on a footing where they can again compete for a title in the NBA. That is partially because the chemistry is broken, and it is partially because you're asking them to repair it in an environment of instability. At best, it's a one-year run. Maybe more, Golick. I know you've taken issue with that, but no one else knows that.
Right.
So Kyrie is asked to set his ego aside, repair the relationship with LeBron in an environment where that could work for 1 year. So I think option one is unrealistic. I think option two, making a trade that sets you up to continue to contend without Kyrie, is also unrealistic. I see one option there. And again, you guys have talked about this morning. It's the rumored potential trade with Boston that would send Isaiah Thomas, Jay Crowder, or Jaylen Brown and a first-round pick to Cleveland for Kyrie. That trade would allow Cleveland to continue to contend. But I think that trade is laughable from Boston's perspective. If I'm Danny Ainge, I laugh that trade off of the phone. If they call and try to do that with me, I know I'm being fleeced. I personally believe that for some reason this is controversial, I would rather have Isaiah Thomas than Kyrie straight up, much less add Jaylen Brown in a first-round pick.
Kyrie's a better player.
That's the consensus goal. Look, I know I'm going against the grain on this, but whether you give me points per game, PER,
right.
I believe real plus minus, all of them go in Isaiah's favor. They neither one of them play defense.
No, they
so
do.
That's Isaiah's biggest critique is also Kyrie's biggest critique. So Kyrie's biggest feather in his cap is what he did in the finals a year ago. And honestly, Isaiah just hasn't been on that stage yet. I mean, he's also got clutch stats. So we can talk about all the three-pointers Kyrie hit to win games, but Isaiah's done it just in less pressured situations. Right. So when I compare apples to apples, they're fairly similar. And I just love Isaiah's grit. I just love his intangibles.
That is interesting.
The problem with Isaiah Thomas,
hesitate.
His biggest the biggest reason that I don't agree with you is completely not his fault, and it's just his size, which is there's just nothing he can do about the fact that he is as small as he is, and it is a detriment. Now, if he's not the most important player on your team, if he was going to play with LeBron forever, then I would say, okay, now you're getting somewhere. But I am of the school that I believe LeBron is going to leave unless, and this was why I chose option number 2, which is do everything in your power to win this year, because I think the one way LeBron doesn't walk away from Cleveland is if the last thing he does there is a parade.
Yeah.
I think it is very difficult to win a championship and then leave.
Yeah, but my only argument against you is I just don't think that trade exists. What is the one that continues to keep them as a title contender better than they are with Kyrie? Eric Bledsoe and Josh Jackson? I don't see it.
No, it probably there's probably nothing that makes you better than Kyrie.
But we're talking about keeps you at that level to contend. Now, when we say that level to contend, that probably means an injury to a Golden State player as well, or something happening to them where they're not at full strength, because them at full strength is still by far the heavy favorite anywhere.
And then, go ahead, Will. I was going to ask you for a more of a big picture look at this thing, which is just the dynamic of modern-day NBA superstars and the total soap opera that this has become. And we've sort of seen it building to this. These guys, and Mike and I made the analogy this morning, these guys are movie stars, right? Movie stars, their lives play out on the National Enquirer and on TMZ and all that kind of stuff. And that's, to a different degree, what is going on here right now, because these guys are stars of that magnitude. Maybe this was sort of a logical conclusion to the way we have built up the megastars of the NBA, but it really is now a soap opera playing out in front of our eyes.
Absolutely. And you've made this point several times. The offseason has been more interesting than the regular season. I think you've gone farther than that. More interesting than the playoffs as well.
Way more interesting than the playoffs were this year. Yeah. I mean, the playoffs are supposed to be more interesting than this, but the playoffs were a foregone conclusion from day one. We had like 5 good games out of 2 months. So to me, this has been much more interesting.
I think another question to ask is, why did this, now I know it just didn't happen now. We know Kyrie, I believe, was in China, but we supposedly have heard that a couple of weeks ago, a week or two ago, but still even a week or two ago. Why then? Why not? We saw Paul George go. We saw Chris Paul make it and go. Why has Kyrie waited this, even up to 2 weeks ago, about his intentions if he wasn't happy? Did something happen in that time frame now?
I think it
did.
That
happened?
I think what happened was he found out that they were shopping him. I think he found out that his name was in the Paul George trade talks, and that upset him.
So this is what it takes. You find out your name was mentioned in a trade thing, and you become sensitive and say, I want out then? I mean,
I think so.
I can hear the unasked question in your voice, Golick, and I'm not saying that's right to be that sensitive. We're dealing with two things, I think. I think we are dealing with a generation of stars that are so sensitive to every form of criticism, actually everything that comes short of pure adulation, right? Anything that can be seen as questioning someone's greatness is the deepest cut you can make. I think you're seeing that with LeBron and Stephen A. right now. I think Kyrie being thought of as a potential trade piece, he doesn't internalize that as business. He internalized that as a complete slight to him. I think that's the environment we live in today.
I agree with that.
I don't think it's unique to today.
I think it's wrong. I think you have to grow thicker skin. I think, by the way, yuck is not the kind of criticism that deserves half of the team of the Boston Red Sox jumping up and clapping someone yelling at Dennis Eckersley. I don't think yuck. I think you guys know what I'm referring to.
Oh, yeah.
I don't
For the audience who doesn't, that was the remark that Dennis Eckersley made that seems to have made David Price so incredibly upset about someone else entirely that led to this confrontation on a team play.
On a team playing out publicly as petty as that was.
But here's what I'll say, and Will Kane is in studio with the Straight Talk, brought to you by Straight Talk Wireless, best phones, best networks, no contracts. Before we start saying this generation is just of stars is so incredibly sensitive, and I will use this analogy because people make fun of me for worshiping Michael Jordan. So if I'm going to say something critical of Michael Jordan, then it comes from a place of because I do idolize him. Michael Jordan, one time, and people who are old enough will remember, during an NBA playoff series, was seen gambling in Atlantic City late at night. A columnist named David Anderson, who was in like a million halls of fame, won Pulitzer Prizes, one of the best-known sports writers of all time, wrote a column criticizing him. This was during the playoffs. Michael Jordan stopped speaking to the entire media for 3 weeks. During the entire playoffs. This was during the conference final and then into the final. He didn't speak to anyone in the media because of something that had been written about him that he thought was, now that one really directly attacked him in a little bit more of a way than this seems to be. But I don't think this is so new. I just think that there's so much more of it now.
You think in this day and age, if Jordan played now, that he wouldn't be able to hold back and he'd just go after people?
I think that he would be perceived as being Michael Jordan. Anything anyone said about him, he put a chip on his shoulder and we applauded him for it. In those days, we said, oh, look how competitive he is. He'll take any slight and turn it into motivation. And I think there's a little bit of similarity to what's going on here now, and somehow we perceive it as weakness or frailty.
Okay, so I think two things. Number one, I think you're right. I think the modern-day athlete is just subjected to a vastly different quantity of criticism than anyone in the 90s or before that ever was subjected to. And many of us respond. I often respond on social media to those that criticize me, not in a defensive way, but in an engaging way. I'd like to directly confront those who have something to say to me. But secondly, and I'm going to defer to both of you guys, you have older kids than me. And I think the privilege of every generation is to think that the next one is taking us to hell in a handbasket, right? Yeah. That's what everyone does.
My kids are taking
It's been happening since the 40s and the 50s, and the next generation was doing it. So I'm going to now exert my privilege. I have children; they're young, and I do think there's just a huge tendency to teach kids that they're never wrong. That it's someone else's fault, that you're always being victimized. You never have to confront the fact that you created the situation that you're in, or that you are the reason for your own problems. And I see it on the playgrounds, Greeny. I see it on the playgrounds, Golick. And I looked at it and I go, no wonder we wake up one day and we have stars that think they can't be criticized. Now, maybe your kids are older. I know at least one of your kids, Golick.
Right.
Maybe it was the same way when you were raising kids, and I'm just seeing the now. I'm not seeing 20 years ago.
Listen, I know I was taught personal responsibility about, I call it wearing the hat. You wear the hat of responsibility. If it's your fault, you own up to it. And I tried to teach that to my kids, but I agree with you. I've how many times on this show have I said, my God, just admit your mistake, not the I confess he did it, where you don't accept responsibility or you blame something else. You blame a movie or you blame this or you blame, well, this happened because of another reason. So I'm with you there. So I agree. My complaint about this generation, and you're right, without trying to sound like the old fuddy-duddy, is I am a face-to-face guy. And I understand we're in a texting, tweeting mode, but I get it, and that's fine, but they're not mutually exclusive. That doesn't mean you have to lose the other. It doesn't mean you can't still do the other sometimes, maybe not at the rate that my generation did it, but it doesn't mean you have to lose it altogether, where we saw a study that said 68% of millennials avoid conversation, avoid face-to-face, avoid it, don't want any part of it. So that's the part that I wish we would get a better balance of, not just have the phone, which is fine, and we better jump into that mentality because you don't want to be the guy left out of that. But I don't know why you can't still have a little bit of both.
I think that to your point, Will, which I think is 100% true, and it doesn't go back to the 40s or certainly not the 1940s. It probably goes back to the 1440s. Right. And this is always what happens because the world changes and people are resistant to change of all kinds. I actually, however, also think, I will always remember, as I was terrible in science, but the one thing I remember from science was the term homeostasis and what it means, which is basically the only constant in life is change. This stuff is always going to keep changing. So the world is just going to go on in that direction, and it doesn't make any difference if you think it's good, bad, or otherwise. That's the world that your children are living in. It's the only reality they're ever going to know. And the only reality that LeBron James and Kyrie Irving have ever known is one in which not only was most communication done electronically or technologically, but also they've both been superstars since they were 8.
Right.
Right? So they've been
pretty insulated
because they were so ridiculously good. Everyone been telling them how great they were, wanting to try and get as close to them as they can because they could see where they were going. So everyone's life experience kind of informs where they wind up. Mike and Mike Wilkane is here. I know that you're very into this other story, so I want to give you a moment to talk about that. And we haven't gotten to it at all here either, so it works perfectly. And that is of now former Cowboys wide receiver who has the least apt name of anyone I can ever think of. His name is Lucky Whitehead, but you cannot have been as unlucky under any circumstances as he was in this scenario. For those of you who are not following the story, the Cowboys release him. He became kind of famous last week when he was the one on social media saying his dog had been kidnapped.
Right.
And that had a happy ending and got his dog back, and that was great. So now Lucky Whitehead is charged with shoplifting in a case in Virginia.
In June.
June 22nd. The Cowboys cut him. He comes out and says, I wasn't in Virginia June 22nd. And oh, by the way, he wasn't. And the police have now fully acknowledged they had the wrong guy. Some other person who looked something like him somehow knew his name and social security number and a bunch of other information, gave them that. Total mistaken identity. He did nothing wrong, and yet he's been released by the Cowboys. Well, that's the story. Will Kane, your thoughts?
So now that I spent a little time this morning criticizing an entire generation, let me fully endorse criticizing two things that are dear to my heart. One, the Dallas Cowboys, and second, myself. First with the Dallas Cowboys. I've loved this team since 1981. It's my first memory, Dwight Clark catching a pass in the back of the end zone from Joe Montana over to Ed Too Tall Jones. But I am very ashamed of what the Dallas Cowboys have done here with Lucky Whitehead. I know why they did it. It's nothing new to football or professional sports. Jimmy Johnson laid it out perfectly for us in the 1990s when he cut a guy who's barely on the team for falling asleep in a team meeting, but let stars get away with much, much more. We know this is the way it goes. We know Lucky Whitehead is a sacrificial lamb. By the way, while we're at it, we also know there's a good chance Lucky Whitehead wasn't even going to make this team. Right. They drafted Ryan Switzer in the 4th round. There's a really strong chance Ryan
Switzer. So, 2 years ago, I'm not you, but 2 years ago he had 6 receptions. Last year he had 3.
Yes, and he's had a role on end arounds and in the return game. He's not a bad player, truthfully, but his prospects for making this team weren't great. Still, that being said, he paid for the sins of the Dallas Cowboys. He paid for the fact that we all came out here and talked about the Dallas Cowboys having a culture problem, what they should do with Zeke. All of, Damian Wilson getting arrested for assault, Nolan Carroll getting arrested for DUI. In the end, the guy that paid for all of that is Lucky Whitehead, and he paid for it for a thing that he did not do. And that shows an inherent lack of principles. That I'm ashamed of the Dallas Cowboys for doing. But more importantly, what I really wanted to talk about this morning is I'm also ashamed of myself, because yesterday on First Take we talked about this. Now, I have self-awareness about what people think of me and what it is I do on any program I go on. I am not a contrarian for contrarian's sake. I'm not here to get attention. I'm not here to try to be different just so you all look at me. I'm here because I often think the group is wrong. And one of the places I think the group is the most wrong is when they prematurely indict someone, often on criminal things. Whether or not it's been Greg Hardy or I can't think of all the instances at this point where I've done it, where I said, I'm not sure. I'm not sure on domestic violence, on assault, on whatever it may be. I'm not sure. Let's wait. Let's see. And Ben, I don't know, unpopular is the least of the word on some of these things. Some accused it sometimes of villainy. Here yesterday with Lucky Whitehead, I said, I don't know how the prosecutors and the police could actually mistake someone's identity to that point. And I doubted Lucky's story, right? I didn't indict him, but I didn't go far enough in doing what it is I pride myself on doing, and that's doubting the public narrative. And in the end, I feel like I fell short of something I think we should all do. And Lucky paid. It's not a huge price. He'll probably get another job.
Yeah, some other teams have been calling, it seems.
We can all move on and go, what's the big deal? But to me, it is a big deal. It's a big deal when the mob, nails someone up and uses them as their scapegoat, and now, obviously wrongly, my job, I feel like often, is to stand up against the tide. And I don't think I did it strong enough. I think we all make mistakes. And so I'd apologize to Lucky today. I don't think I could have saved Lucky's job. I don't have an inflated view of myself, but I know what I require of myself. So I would apologize to Lucky Whitehead on behalf of myself, and I would hope others would feel the same way, including the Dallas Cowboys. You deserved better, Lucky Whitehead.
I thought the Dallas Cowboys handled it so poorly. Just by Jason Garrett doing the Marshawn Lynch situation. It's one thing when Marshawn Lynch does, another thing when the head coach of your football team does it. I'm sorry, that sounded awful out of them and how they handle this entire situation.
It was the kind of thing that Bill Belichick can get away with doing. And
because he's
only
done it.
He can.
Because he's done it.
Yeah, but only he can. I mean, even Belichick, I think, would not totally skirt something like this the way it was done. I mean, Belichick got up there when the Brady thing was going on, when the Deflategate thing was going on, and he was quoting my cousin Vinny.
Right.
I mean, he actually addressed something that had to be addressed. In this case, this was something that had to be addressed. Just admit a mistake.
Yeah.
I mean, back to your previous point. Look, it was a mistake.
Yeah.
We thought he got arrested. We're tired of all this. He's not the most important player on our team anyway. We made a mistake. Just admit it. The world will move on.
Exactly right. They will.
You make it look worse.
He knew it was a mistake. That's the most obvious thing is coming.
Without a doubt.
And by the way, I didn't mean to be sanctimonious, but I just feel, I don't know. I feel strongly about this.
I like it when you're sanctimonious.
I don't.
Golick is going to look up sanctimonious as soon as the conversation
I have no idea what it means. I just thought I'd say it. I said it in context, all right?
Well, that was a lot of fun. Thank you, as always.
Thanks,
we look forward to it, and you'll see him on First Take later and a whole lot more. Mike and Mike presented by Progressive Insurance.
Well, Greeny, we're halfway through another baseball season, and we're really seeing some players who stand out as winners.
Kind of like business travelers who win at business by staying at La Quinta Inns and Suites.
That's because you can put your La Quinta Returns loyalty points to work on the spot with instant free nights.
Just drive up with no reservation and instantly redeem points for a free night that same night simply by using the La Quinta app.
It's like hitting a grand slam.
With an app instead of a bat.
Well played.
Prepare to win at business by learning more about instant free nights and check out the summer rates at lq.com. All right, Mike and Mike, before we get to the next question here, which we will in a minute, some of the reaction to the Lucky Whitehead story, which we hadn't gotten into all morning here. I mean, could anyone be less aptly named than Lucky Whitehead? He should change his name to Unlucky Whitehead, considering what just has happened here. And all kidding aside, I realize you referenced Jason Garrett's press conference, if you will, yesterday. We didn't play it. We should play it for those of you who didn't get a chance to see it. There were a lot of questions about Lucky Whitehead. Again, they cut him and then found out that the crime of which he had been committed was 100% committed by someone else, and he had nothing to do with it. And the police actually apologized to him, but this is after the fact, and so now the Cowboys are left looking awfully bad. Their coach, Jason Garrett, didn't make it any better.
Yesterday we made a decision that we deemed to be in the best interest of the Dallas Cowboys. We're standing by that decision. We're going to move on.
But that decision was based on the idea that he had been arrested last month, correct?
Yesterday we made a decision that we thought was in the best interest of the Dallas Cowboys. And we're going to stand by that decision. We're going to move on.
Not fair to him to just keep saying that over and over?
It's the truth. We made a decision that we thought was in the best interest of the Dallas Cowboys.
Do you have some people working for the Dallas Cowboys that are just too stupid to work for this team?
I'll just stand by the statement that I made. We made a decision yesterday that we thought was in the best interest of the Dallas Cowboys, and we're going to stand by that decision. We're going to move forward.
Why are some of the other players, Jason, dealing with off-the-field issues then still on the Cowboys?
Guys, this will be the last time I'll say it. I appreciate your interest in it. We made a decision yesterday in regards to Lucky Whitehead that we think is in the best interest of the Dallas Cowboys. We're standing by that decision. We're going to move forward.
Let me answer that last question. The question was, why are some of the other Cowboys, have they not been caught for some of their transgressions? Like basically an entire defensive line over the last 2 years that have been suspended for a number of games. And let me answer it by talent. That's what it is. It's why they signed Greg Hardy, because they thought he'd get him a lot of sacks, and when they didn't, and all of a sudden they had all the support for him and all the issues Greg Hardy had, we have support for him, we're going to take care of him, didn't sack the quarterback enough, all of a sudden he's not going to be on their team. That's what it's about. And the Cowboys aren't the only team guilty of this, of talent. I've said it forever. The more talented you are, the longer the leash you have. Lucky Whitehead had 6 catches 2 years ago, 3 catches last year. I know he's in some of the end-of-the-round plays and such like that, but he wasn't deemed a good enough player for this team, had some trust issues with the team, and this was basically the last straw for them to cut him, only this straw didn't break. The straw was wrong on what he did.
There was no straw.
There was no straw, and the Cowboys can't admit it. So, to me, you just sound foolish doing this instead of maybe the theme of this show is just say it. At least he's talking to people there, the same thing over and over again. Just say it. You know, we got that one wrong. We still don't feel that we want him on this team for whatever reason. But you know what? You can't say that the arrest and then the missing of the court date in July 6th and all that wasn't involved in his being cut. Right? It happened right after all that happened.
Yeah.
So
it would be ridiculous to pretend otherwise.
Say that. You know what? We got that part of it wrong. We still don't feel he should be on our team. That part of it was wrong. I mean, something like that. Because you sound damn foolish just doing what you did yesterday, which is a shame, which is a real shame in that case.
Also, the thing with his dog, did I miss something? That wasn't a hoax, was it?
No, I've never heard anything about it being a hoax.
I mean, I don't know how you hold against a person the fact that his dog got kidnapped.
There was supposedly a car incident last year that he wasn't open about to the Cowboys.
Right, so there's that.
So maybe there's some trust.
There was that. There was trust issues that go back a year. But my point is the things that happened recently were the two things that happened recently were the incident with his dog,
right,
which was played out very publicly on social media.
As it was.
From what I saw was a legitimate situation that had a happy ending,
right,
to my understanding.
Right.
And then
being falsely identified,
which he didn't have anything to do with.
Yeah.
So again, if he wasn't ever going to be on the team in the first place, most likely.
And that's fine. I mean, that's fine. You're allowed to cut someone for ability reasons, but you know what? Explain it. And not just go with the ridiculous line over and over again.
All right, we have a lot of reaction to that. We'll get to it, but I want to get a next question here, so let's jump to that. Next question is brought to you by Indeed.com. Post your next job opening on the world's #1 job site. I have a variety of questions here, Golick, ready to go, and we will get them started with the first question. The over-under at 1.5 on NBA Finals appearances remaining in Kyrie Irving's career.
Wow.
You go over or under?
Well, if he's with Cleveland this year, it'll be 1 for sure, and then he'll just need 1 more. He's got a lot of time left in his career, and he's one of the better, certainly offensive scoring point guards out there. So just by sheer length of his career, I'm going to go over on that.
I'm going to go over also, but not with great confidence. If he winds up, if he winds up on the Knicks, there isn't a whole lot of reason to believe they're going to the finals particularly soon. If he winds up on Minnesota, then I think he's got a real shot. They would look like the best bet to succeed Golden State in the West whenever Golden State starts to fall.
He's got a career long enough to play through what Golden State has going on right now.
Right, he's 25. I'll go over, but not with great certainty. Next question. True or false, like Adam Silver, you feel bad for Cleveland?
Listen, that's false. I don't feel bad for anybody. I mean, I'm not that person that feels, I feel bad for them. I mean, sports are sports, circumstances are circumstances. I know it's their jobs out there they're dealing with. They're all going to be okay going through it. Feel bad for Cleveland. They did get a championship. They had the Indians in the World Series. The Indians are leading their close race this year, and they have a good team this year. So, no, I'm not one of those that feels bad like that, especially since they did get a championship under their belt that had been such a long time for. So, no, I'd say false.
I'm going to say true. I do feel bad.
You feel bad for players. You feel bad for cities. You feel bad for – I know you do.
I'm a person with enormous empathy and compassion, and I feel bad for everyone involved in this situation in Cleveland because it should be – I mean, it doesn't have to be what it is, and it is what it is. You've got the best team – and you're gonna lose it. I mean, you've got this moment of, certainly if we're talking about the fans, you've got this moment of greatness, and it's gonna get taken away from you. It just strikes me as a shame. I hated it when the thing happened with Kobe and Shaq as well. All right, next question. Getting dropped off by your mom at training camp is blank.
Do you think I'm going to say anything other than a positive experience is just fine? I'm not saying anything bad against Mom. Not a chance.
So you saw this story, a Panthers rookie got dropped off at training camp by their mom, and people were making fun of him.
So what?
I want to read Amy Trask's, I want to read it because she said it better than I would say, that I could say it. So I'm going to find it because I did not like the way people were making fun of that. I get it. Like if it's good-natured.
There'll be good-natured fun. But in the long run, so who cares?
But in a lot of ways, we've sort of lost our ability to have good-natured fun.
Oh, you're not kidding. That's what Twitter is so easy to hide behind your keyboard.
So here's what she tweeted. Amy Trask tweeted 22 hours ago, "Dear everyone who is mocking a player for being dropped off by his mom, remember that next time you opine that players should be good kids." So he got dropped off by his mom.
So what?
That said, did you ever have anyone get dropped off by their mom?
I don't recall that.
At training camp?
We'd have mocked them.
You would have...
Good-natured.
In a good-natured way. Yeah. You would have scotch-taped him to the goalpost.
Well, that has nothing to do with being dropped off by your mom, but we'd had fun with it, but there's nothing wrong with that.
Next question. If the trade deadlines in all sports were at the end of the regular season instead of where they are, meaning you could make a trade right up to the end of the year, would sports be better, worse, or about the same?
Holy, talk about rent a player for 2 weeks. No, I don't like that.
Me neither.
I don't like
way
that
worse.
At all. Yeah.
1,000 times
I don't like
worse.
that at all.
Should go the other way.
Yeah.
They should move the trade deadlines up.
Yeah.
The trades during the season should only be in place for teams that suffer a major debilitating injury right at the very beginning. This whole idea of tanking the rest of a season in order to try and build for the future is totally unfair to the fans. It's totally unfair to the people who bought tickets for games that they should had an expectation should be something and they turn out to be something else. The trade deadlines should be moved up, not back in all sports. Final question, and let the record show I did not write these, I'm just reading them. Which is more likely? The Patriots will go 16-0 or the Jets will go 0-16?
By the way, the Patriots, their ESPN's Football Power Index, the nerds, their rating, sorry, Hembo, is plus 9.2, meaning the Patriots are considered 9.2 points better than an average team on a neutral field. No other team is above 5. Next to the Packers at 4.8. So they are so well ahead of everybody else.
So is it more likely they'll go 16-0 or the Jets will go 0-16?
More likely the Patriots go 16-0.
I agree. I think that is more likely. I don't think either one will happen.
I don't either.
I do not think the Jets will go 0-16.
That's not the question. The question is
Let's
more
put it
likely.
this way. I think the Jets will win more games than the Patriots will lose. So if that answers the question on the Patriots side, I think the Patriots, if I had to bet on it right now, will go 14-2, and the Jets will go 4-12. So that would get it closer to the Patriots side.
Okay, Kevin, for the grand prize of $1 million, what color is the White House?
I know this.
5 seconds.
Oh, switching to Geico could save you a bunch of money on car insurance?
Okay. Judges? That's true, Kevin. They'll allow it. Congratulations. You're a winner.
Woo!
Geico, because saving 15% or more on car insurance is always a great answer.
We have some breaking news. Within just the last few minutes, Novak Djokovic announced he is going to miss the rest of the tennis season because of the injured right elbow that caused him to withdraw at Wimbledon. It means he will pull out of the U.S. Open and end his streak of participating in 51 consecutive Grand Slams. The two-time U.S. Open champ announced his decision, saying, quote, "This is the decision that had to be made at this moment. He had never missed a major tournament since he entered his first, which was the Australian in 2005. That's the third longest active run among men and seventh longest in history." Novak Djokovic's odds, let me see here. He had the fourth best odds to win the Open behind only the other members of the Big Four. Some will look at this and say it's one less barrier in Federer's
That's exactly right. I mean, Federer's the story right now, right? I mean, as long as he keeps going, he's got this new regiment now where he's taking the time, taking breaks, missed the French Open completely, and for the good of...
And the whole clay court season. He took a whole chunk of the year. He did it last year where he took months off.
Right.
And he's prolonging his career by doing it.
Nobody can say it's not working.
No, you can't, and you
Not
can't
one
stop
bit.
him from doing it.
No.
Now, we could get Chris McHenry or someone like that on here who would tell you the impact it's having on the tour, because the tour depends on their stars to show up in all these cities to get people to buy tickets. But that's not, I guess, Federer at this point, who has done so much for the game.
You said it right there. At this point, this guy's been on tour a long time, and for a long time he's played in all the tournaments, right? So now, I mean, there is zero. There should be zero issue with what he's doing. If anybody's saying he's hurting tennis because of it, and he shouldn't be doing it because of that,
right,
I would debate that till the cows come home.
Those are two different things.
Yeah.
That he shouldn't be doing it, I agree with you. No one should be telling him he shouldn't do it. That it is having a negative impact.
No.
Because the sport kind of depends on all these
get
small
that.
tournaments.
But saying that he should be playing every week because he owes it to tennis.
Right. No,
that situation.
Look, you can't do more for a sport than Roger Federer has done for tennis. He's one of the greatest, if not the greatest champions of all time. He's one of the, if not the classiest champions ever to play in any sport.
But it goes into team sports as well. From the call-ups to not playing your stars at the end of a football season to baseball and the call-ups, and if for a team that's fighting for a spot, then now playing a team that's playing all call-ups and getting an easier chance for it, or the product that's put out on the field. The for a player, it's about what he can do. For a team, it's about what puts a team in the best position. And sometimes it's not the greatest for the fans. But they're on more rare occasions than not of call-ups, of players sitting at the end of a season. So I am all for doing what you have to do to get where you need to go.
Yes, of course. Now, the fear in this is that you'll start seeing younger players doing it. Right. Because if all of a sudden a guy who's 26 instead of 36 says, all that really matters to me, because I make so much money, I have all these endorsements, whatever else it is, I'm just going to focus on the Australian and the French and all this, and I'm not going to play the full schedule that all the great champions traditionally have. All of them have, going back to as long as certainly I'm aware of. Then the tour, as we know, it will die. It will die. Unlike a lot of other, it's just a different. Golfers don't do it that way. They don't play every week.
I'm with you, but let's not jump from A to Z.
No, I'm not jumping anywhere. Again, I do not fault Roger Federer for it at all.
No, I don't either.
I'm just saying that's the fear.
That is the fear, and so we just have to wait and see. It's just like in college football. Guys play the whole regular season. Prominent guys miss a bowl game. Now, will guys, if they're playing bad, miss the last couple of regular season games? We just have to wait and see where it goes.
Just so everyone understands what I'm talking about. When Roger Federer decided to skip the clay court season, all of us in America only noticed he didn't play the French Open, right? I mean, that's the only one you paid attention to. But there are several tournaments that lead up to that.
Right.
And Roger Federer not being there impacts those tournaments in an adverse way. But they survive one guy not being there. But if all of a sudden, there are only like 5 people in the whole sport people are paying to come out and see.
Right.
I'm making my plans now for the day I want to go out and see the U.S. Open, and you're trying to figure out which day.
What if
make
3 of
sure
them decide,
they're
going to be rested?
Well, now, no one will rest the U.S. Open. That's the point.
No, but the tournament.
But some smaller tournament, if all of a sudden at the same time you don't have Federer, well, right now you don't have Serena at all anyway because she's on maternity leave or whatever you want to call it, she's pregnant. So you don't have overwhelmingly the biggest star on the women's side. Now, if all of a sudden you don't have Federer and you don't have Murray and you don't have Nadal, you got nothing.
Let me ask you a question though, and I honestly do not know. I don't know tennis enough to know the answer to this. All the smaller tournaments you're talking about. Let's say over the last 5 years. And how many of those smaller tournaments were the Big Four all in them?
An enormous number.
Really? See, I honestly do not know that.
It's the tennis players don't not play. See, that's the difference. It's just I don't know why. I think it's for this reason.
But do they play everyone?
Pretty much.
Okay, see, that's what I don't know.
They pretty much do.
Then if those guys are, I could see the concern if those guys are always in those smaller tournaments together.
I mean, I was always amazed as a kid. Like you would see Jimmy Connors win Wimbledon, and he's standing there and he's holding up the plate, and it's like the greatest moment of his life. And the next
week he's losing.
It's like 2 days later. It's not even. This is a Sunday.
Yeah.
On Tuesday, he's in Cincinnati, playing at the ATP event. Now, it may not be quite that way anymore. They may not play everything, but whereas the golfers pick and choose their schedules.
Right.
And so ahead of time which one Tiger's playing, which one Phil's playing, which one Spieth is playing now. In tennis, they for the most part play them all. They travel all over the world. It's exhausting.
Coming full circle, this obviously is an injury situation.
Right.
So, we hope he gets better and gets back in because that Big Four are fun to watch
it absolutely
when they're playing
is.
one another. It really is.
All right, a guy who's got great insight into this situation with Kyrie and LeBron, Chauncey Billups will join us next. And then Nick Saban is on the way as well.
America, it's time for some straight talk. You love your phone. Look at you. You hardly put it down. But you don't love that expensive wireless plan, do you? So what if I told you can keep that phone, network, and number 2 for a lot less? Well, this is me telling you, it's time to switch to Straight Talk, guys. Bring your own phone and get unlimited plans starting at just $45 a month on America's largest, most dependable 4G LTE networks. Straight Talk Wireless, only at Walmart.
Savings may vary. Please refer always to the latest terms and conditions of service at straighttalk.com.
Mike and Mike, we are presented by Progressive Insurance. We'll have Chauncey Billups live for you in a minute on the Shell Pennzoil Performance Line. And then Nick Saban in this hour as well as the NBA offseason soap opera continues to turn. College football is heating up. Things are ready to go. And you know what's remarkable? Just a quick observation about college football. We had Jimbo Fisher in our studio yesterday, and we had a nice conversation with him. It was a good and interesting interview, but there was nothing earth-shattering in it. There was nothing even remotely controversial about it. And I glanced down at Twitter, and his name was trending 5 minutes after he was on with us. You just realize the passion of college football fans is insane.
Oh,
like people were literally just tweeting Jimbo Fisher on Mike and Mike right now, and then just commenting on stuff he was saying that was. It wasn't particular. I mean, there was nothing about it that was special. He was talking about the reasons for scheduling, the benefits of scheduling a big game like Alabama early in the season, whatever it is. There was nothing overwhelmingly noteworthy about that interview. I hope it was just entertaining and interesting to listen to.
I love having him on, but I'm with you.
Boom.
Trending.
Yeah. I mean, it's unbelievable.
Football, man. College football.
College football.
All the basically a lot of the teams will get going next week is when a lot of them had their summer school where they'd work out and get some credits out of the way, and then they usually get, depending on the school, a week or a couple of weeks off before they report back, some less than that, before they report back basically next week and start practice. I mean, what a great time. I go back to the college days all the time, getting back with the gang again, the fellas, and how great it is, man. I didn't have the summer school thing wasn't going on. I don't know when that really started, where you went back and they paid for you for summer school to take like 6 credits basically, and while you did it, you all worked out together. That was certainly what it was all about, working out together, and then getting the credits helped as well because if something became if the load became too tough during the season, at some point you could drop a class or two because you had the extras there. It worked out well, but you could all work out together. So for me, I left in May when the year was over and went back in August. You all worked out on your own. You went home with a book of basically the strength coach's workout, and you did that. Now these guys go home, and less than a month later, they're all together again, working out together, running together. It's great camaraderie. It's a great thing. And then they get a little bit of time off, and then here you are getting ready for the season. So, man, the anticipation of a new season in any sport is just so fantastic. It really, really is.
So we look forward to that. We'll have more again, Nick Saban coming up later in this hour. I got a ton of Twitter reaction, interestingly, to our Roger Federer conversation, which we'll get to, the Lucky Whitehead stuff as well, but certainly all eyes continue to be on the NBA and on the Cleveland Cavaliers in particular and the continuing issues between LeBron James and Kyrie Irving, and will this cause the breakup of those two stars who have been in the NBA Finals 3 consecutive years? Our own Chauncey Billups obviously has great insight into that situation, and he joins us now on the Shell Pennzoil Performance Line. Chauncey, Mike and Mike here. How you been?
I'm good. What's going on, fellas?
Well, listen, not much. We're just sitting here watching the soap opera play out before our eyes, and as talk show hosts, we're extraordinarily grateful for it, and as basketball fans, I'm extremely interested in it because it could create sort of a monumental shift in power of one of the best teams in the sport. But let's just start with whatever insight there was. At one point, there was an opinion that you knew this had happened, that Kyrie had asked for a trade when you were there talking about the GM job, and then you were clarifying that you didn't know. So for our audience, which has not heard, can you just sort of explain what it was that you knew and how, if at all, it informed your decision not to go to Cleveland?
Well, I did a radio show with a good friend of mine yesterday, Dick Lombardi in Denver, and he didn't, but somebody, I guess a writer that was listening had misquoted me saying that I had knew that, Kyrie had requested a trade when I was going through the process, and it was untrue. It was false. I was misquoted. Because at the time that I declined the opportunity to be the president of the team, Kyrie and Dan and the Cat, they hadn't even had their meeting yet. So I was misquoted there. But what I did say, guys, is that, obviously you go through the process and you doing your due diligence on them, just like they're doing their background and due diligence, and they're vetting you. you start to find out things, about the team that most of the world just naturally doesn't know because they're not taking a deep dive like you are when you're looking at a life-altering opportunity. So, I mean, that was pretty much all I said. But I tell you, and I've said this time and time again, guys, like it was a great opportunity, and I'm grateful that Dan Gilbert, who's a friend of mine who I've known for years, but I'm grateful that he even seen me in those eyes, through those goggles, and see me as a possible president and offer me that opportunity. It just wasn't time at the time of it, but it was a great opportunity, and I was thrilled to be in that race.
Well, just think, if you were in that race, you'd be trying to make, or if you did end up there, you'd be trying to deal with this situation. So is it unrealistic for me to just say, how is it possible that if there really is all this Twitter about this, story about that these two guys can't somehow, some way actually speak to one another? Is that so unrealistic for me to think that they can't have some kind of conversation to see where each other is at?
That's very realistic, to be honest with you, and you know that, Mike. I mean, that's team sports are, it's something else. But I don't believe that these guys dislike each other. I don't know what this thing is really all about, but you've played on several teams, and you don't have to go. You ain't got to go to dinner or family reunions with your teammates. All you got to do is have a good, working, respectful environment, and as we can see, these two guys have had that. I mean, they work very well together. So I'm not sure what it really is, but it really is sad because Kyrie's such a special player and he's young, and I still think that there's some things that he can probably learn from a guy in LeBron James who's been excellent and has carried the league for over a decade.
Mike and Chauncey Billups. So we have a question that we're asking our audience today, and again, you might have been the person who was in the shoes of those who will now make this decision. If you're looking at it, you really have three options now if you're the Cavaliers. You can keep Kyrie. You're not obligated to trading him, and you could just sort of tell those guys, look, work it out. We're going to try and win this thing again. You can trade him for short-term help, meaning trade him for something that puts you all in to try and win it this year. Or you can trade him for long-term help, which is to say you may be staring at a future without LeBron 1 year from now, so you trade him for young players and draft picks and all of that. Which do you think they might be most inclined to do? And if you were sitting there, if you were making this decision, which do you think you would be most inclined to do?
Well, I mean, when you get this close, I mean, me and my years in the league, and when you're blessed enough and to get this close to winning a championship. Now, we know the juggernaut that's on the other side that's going to be waiting for years to come in the Warriors. But if you can get this close, to me, you got to go for it. To me, you got to go for it, and you got to try to win. Now, does that mean keeping him and still trying to build out the roster? For me, I would say yeah. I wouldn't put a plug on the kid. It's just too special. You know how men are. Men can have their differences and still be okay at the end of the day. But and they all have a job to do. So to me, you get this close. Those two guys have a wonderful chemistry and synergy out there on the floor. You just try to work through it, and then you just see what happens.
I completely agree, and that's exactly the way I voted, that you keep him there, and I hope that's the way it happens as well. If they do want to try and trade him, how much does it hurt trade value when a guy says, I want to be traded, and other teams out there say, oh, okay, this guy wants to be traded, so if we get a phone call, while we know money has to equal and all that, we can really kind of lowball them talent-wise.
Well, of course, you expose yourself. And other teams may, think that you're desperate to make a move, to keep the chemistry together or to please so and so. Like they know that you're desperate, so obviously they're not going to mortgage the entire house on it. Even though he's that kind of player, he's a special player that will command some garner some real attention. But you lose a little bit of traction when that happens, but not all. He's a special enough player where teams will give up a lot for him. I mean, he's one of our best players in our game.
See, I think so, too. Mike and Mike presented by Progressive Insurance. And then all of these people will start throwing numbers at you about numbers when Kyrie was on the floor and LeBron wasn't. And people will point out that he's certainly not an above-average defender or an elite defender by any means. And that's fine. A lot of good offensive players are not necessarily. So you love him, right? Because there are all of a sudden coming out of the woodwork are people who are somewhat critical of Kyrie's overall game and his ability to carry a team as the best player.
I'm a big fan of Kyrie's, but, I mean, I'm not going to sit here and tell you that, Kyrie doesn't have holes in his game. There are certainly a lot of things that he could be better at. But if you talk about the game on the line and you need a bucket, there are not a lot of guys that are better than Kyrie Irving. Mm-hmm. So I think that he could be better at facilitating and just kind of knowing the game and reading the game and leading, and leading out there and being a defensive presence. Sure, there's a lot of opportunity out there for him to get better. But if he doesn't get better, and this is his ceiling, he's still one of the top players in our game. So, I also stated this, like it confused me because I know in my era and the way that I played and what I played for was only winning. All I cared about was winning. That was the best stat for me. Kyrie has the opportunity to win every single year, not just win big, but win it all. He has the green light on the team. I mean, he's a max player. He's got commercials. He's an all-star. I mean, Game 7 of the NBA Finals 2 years ago, Game 7, you got the best player in the world on your team. The coach calls a timeout with the game on the line. He draws a player for you. You hit the biggest shot maybe in finals history. It's definitely the biggest that I've seen. So as a player, especially as a great player, all you want is a coach and an organization and a fan base that really believes in you, and they're going to give you the opportunity to showcase that talent. Well, he's gotten all of that. Like, he's checked off all of those boxes, and that's why, to me, it's confusing.
So that situation is in the air. One concrete situation is that Derrick Rose does sign with Cleveland. Derrick Rose did have some numbers from points to minutes per game that were the best he's had in a few years. But overall, Chauncey, do you think this is, a year deal? We're trying to catch some lightning in a bottle here?
Yeah, I'll tell you what. I said this all year long last year. I watched Derrick Rose very closely, and I was very impressed. There's still a lot of juice in Derrick. Derrick had a very good year. Just think of the unhealthy situation and that he was in playing with the Knicks. You bring in this explosive pick and roll point guard, gets in the lane guy to run the triangle offense, which is a no-no. And he's still, it's toxic every single day, there with all the mellow rumors and all the things that's going on. Very toxic situation, not conducive to, a healthy, good environment. And he still pulls off, to me, a very good season for Derrick Rose and what he was coming in there for. I think he's going to have a big year. I really do. He signed for, obviously, the vet minimum. I think he's going to have a big year because he's playing for a coach that's going to be able to make him look really good. And, he'll be able to get back out there on the free agent market next year and do real well. That's what I believe.
Well, it's been a fascinating July, that's for sure. I can't wait to see what August holds. And, Chauncey, it's always our pleasure to catch up with you. Thanks for a few minutes today. Enjoy the rest of the summer.
Thanks, Chauncey.
All right, guys. Y'all take care now.
That's Chauncey Billups on the Shell Pennzoil Performance Line. Get instant gold status at Shell. Join the Fuel Rewards program now at fuelrewards.com/gold. And again, if you missed the beginning of the conversation, he cleared up what was attributed to him initially and said that it was a misquoting, in which he said, and you heard him explain it here, he did a deep dive into the organization, and in that, clearly, he discovered that maybe things weren't completely hunky-dory with Kyrie and or LeBron, but that he did not know that Kyrie had, in fact, asked for a trade and that meeting had not taken place yet. I know, Mike, you asked the question earlier, and it's worth pointing out again, why did this happen when it happened? The NBA Finals ended a month ago.
Right.
Why would Kyrie have waited as long as he did to say he wanted to be traded? And again, I'm not speaking to Kyrie on this topic, but it does feel like one of the things that happened in there was his name was included in trade conversations. They were on the verge of trading for Paul George, Jimmy Butler, whatever the case might have been, and they were at least considering trading Kyrie Irving, and maybe that upset him. Whether you think that's a good reason or not, that seems to be what happened.
Yeah, maybe it did. And that's the one thing that you try and say from the outside looking in is don't take it personal. It's business, but you take things personal. And you want to be considered in that level. If, in fact, that is the case, you want to be considered in that level of untradeable. You know what? You wouldn't think about getting rid of me. And if his names came up, and maybe he did get mad. I don't know. That's the one thing we don't know. We don't know. Just like all the rag magazines I buy, when you read about the different actors and stuff, you're not sure what all the truth is, but it's salacious and you like reading about it. And that's what's going on here. Do we ever find out what's really going on? Do these guys ever really chat? But I'm with him. You heard what he said. You heard what he voted. I'd try and keep this thing together and say, let's go back to the finals and see what happens. And that Kyrie means that you're going to be on this team, with LeBron James, with Derrick Rose, with Kevin Love, and we're going to go to the finals and we're going to try and beat Golden State again.
Yeah, I mean, I don't believe that the ship has sailed on that. The one place this could be, in theory, a blessing in disguise is if you really are 1 year away from a LeBron-less future. Could you use Kyrie Irving as your Herschel Walker? Could you actually be the unique team that gets equal value or some great value for a superstar? Because to the point that you made in your question to Chauncey about teams knowing they can fleece you, the one difference between Paul George and Indiana and some of those other situations is Cleveland doesn't have to trade him.
No.
They don't have to. They can legitimately keep him. They control him for 2 more years. And other teams know that. He's also so young and so good and controllable for 2 more years. He's a more valuable entity right now for all those reasons than Paul George, even if he's not a better player than Paul George. So I think they would get a lot for him. And if what you decide is, I will not sit here and destroy them. I will not destroy Dan Gilbert and anyone else who makes this decision if what they do is they trade him for just a host of young players and draft picks.
I don't think they're going to get as much as you think. I just don't think it'll happen.
Well, if they don't, then don't trade him at all.
Right,
I mean, you have to be crazy.
Yep.
But if they do get that, look, we can compliment, we can praise LeBron James for signing all these short-term deals with all these outs because it keeps the pressure on the organization at all times. And that's accurate. It does. It works to his benefit. But let's not forget, it also does create a situation with no stability.
No, it does. You're right.
Don't fault the organization for saying, look, if I can't depend on you staying here, what do you want the Cavaliers to do they haven't done, right?
Oh,
if LeBron
I agree.
really is planning on leaving next year, he spent into the luxury tax and the threshold and all that kind of stuff as much as he can. They've gone out and gotten everyone they could possibly get. What Golden State did is bordering on unfair. They're so good. And that's the only thing standing between you and winning championships. So if you're Dan Gilbert or whomever it is, you can look LeBron in the face and say, listen, if you're going to leave me now, why wouldn't I be building for the what is it I could have done that would have kept you here? I've done everything I could possibly do.
He spent money. Sign the checks.
So, if they want to set themselves up for the future, it would be kind of hard to criticize them for that.
No, I agree with that. They have done everything you could want. If you're a Cavs fan, paying the luxury tax more than anybody else and doing what they've done to have a championship team while LeBron's there. I get it.
If they turned Kyrie, I don't have an example of who we'd be talking about. But if they turned Kyrie into 2 really good young players and 2 good draft picks, would you criticize them for that?
No. I wouldn't.
Because they would be pulling the plug on winning a title this year.
I wouldn't. There's part of me that says you have to try for a title as long as you have LeBron. But there is part of me that understands what you're saying. LeBron never put them in a position where they said we have LeBron for the next 5 years.
Could you do this? Could you go to LeBron right now? Here's the question. Do you think this is a realistic scenario? And the history between LeBron and Dan Gilbert is what it is. So I don't know how that affects
Dan Gilbert would have to send a liaison.
Someone would have to go talk to LeBron.
Kobe, Altman.
And you probably wouldn't even get LeBron.
Yeah.
You would get like one of his guys first. But somewhere the conversation would be this. Look, we're going to trade Kyrie. Tell me right now that you're going to stay. And if you're telling me right now you're going to stay, I will build to win. I'll keep doing what I'm doing. I will keep building to win right now. I will make the best trade I can make that will help us win it this year and the next year. But if you won't tell me that, if you can't promise me you're going to be here, then I'd be crazy not to consider my future and look at the possibilities involving younger players and draft picks. Is that a realistic conversation that could take place?
It's all realistic conversation. Why did we stop conversations? I literally don't get it.
But would LeBron answer it?
I don't know.
I mean, what would he say?
I don't know LeBron. I don't know what he would do. I just, again, do not understand. That's a conversation. What you just said, that's exactly what a conversation should be like. No matter what answer you get, that should at least be the conversation. Then you had the conversation. Blows my mind.
Well, I have to believe they've asked him on numerous occasions,
you would
LeBron,
think
do
so.
You plan to stay here?
Yeah.
And I'm sure he has said, well, look, I will make that decision when I have to make it. And while I'm here, I'm committed and in and all that. And he's well within his rights to do that. But the flip side of that is, if they can't depend on you being there,
I know.
They have to act like you're going to be gone.
So, again, we don't know if they've had conversation and if they had what they've been about. I hope they have. I hope there's been more communication than I think.
This is all so much more fun talking about things we don't know than it is talking about things we know, because the possibilities are limitless. All right, it's only going to get better next. The one, the only, Nick Saban.
Mm-hmm. Well, Greeny, we're halfway through another baseball season, and we're really seeing some players who stand out as winners.
Kind of like business travelers who win at business by staying at La Quinta Inns and Suites.
That's because you can put your La Quinta Returns loyalty points to work on the spot with instant free nights.
Just drive up with no reservation and instantly redeem points for a free night that same night simply by using the La Quinta app.
It's like hitting a grand slam.
With an app instead of a bat.
Well played.
Prepare to win at business by learning more about instant free nights and check out the summer rates at lq.com. All right, we will have Nick Saban joining us momentarily here. He's on his way up to ESPN, where I just saw his interview schedule. He's going to be, my goodness, he is going to be literally everywhere coming up today.
Yeah. That's what happens when you're there.
We showed on TV like a nice piece he did with Marcus Spears, and in it he was talking about how he goes fly fishing for the trout. And I'm always fascinated by that, like different people and what they like to do with their downtime. What would you say is the number one hobby of active, busy people to go do on a vacation?
I'll tell you what I did. I fished. You know, after a football season, I would finish, and Chris's dad, Ken Hansen, God rest his soul, at the end of the season when I was like the sorest, you know, and my whole body was sore, we would usually go down the floor or somewhere and we would fish. And we would do bass fishing, and it wouldn't be, a lot of times I'll do the trolling motor and you cast, you're looking for spots, but I'd be so kind of sore and I didn't feel like doing all that. So we'd do shiner fishing, put a shiner on the hook, you put a balloon.
You don't have to tell me.
Well, I know.
But explain for the audience.
Shiner's a little fish. Put it on a hook, you put a balloon on the line like a bobber, and you just kind of throw it out there, and you sit there and you drink some beers and you wait for the balloon to go down. Unfortunately, you see the balloon run a lot of time because the gar are taking the shiner instead of the bass, as you well know.
When the gar takes the shiner, I mean, that's really a bad...
It really is. It really is. It's when the balloon's going across top. When the balloon goes down, you got yourself a bass and reel one in, as you know. As you know all of this.
And have done so many times.
Right. But
just yesterday.
To me, it was fishing. I know a lot of NFL players do love to fish, but it's either that or just go somewhere and do nothing. And for any sport, really, I mean, you're just so worn out at the end of a season. That depends on where you are. You have family, you have kids, you're going to go somewhere, you're going to lay by a pool, by a beach, just hang out a little bit. But for me, right after season, I definitely enjoyed that.
Yeah, because I always wonder that with golfers. Like my answer to that question is I go play golf on my vacation. What do golfers do?
Golfers like to fish
on vacation.
I used to actually put a fishing pole in my bag when I go play at some of these charity tournaments that have great lakes on the course. And while there's a holdup on these things, fish some of the lakes. It's awesome.
Here he is. He is a 5-time national champion coach, and he likes to fly fish in his downtime.
There you go.
He is the one and only Nick Saban from Alabama. Joins us this morning on Mike and Mike. How are you, Coach?
Doing great. How are you guys?
Doing well, Coach. You know, sometimes I don't like it as much. I do a lot of bass fishing. I get, unless I'm doing it wrong, the elbow and the shoulder. I guess I had too many surgeries on that side. It gets me after a while with the fly fishing. Maybe I'm not doing it right.
Well, it's a lot of fun. I like it because it keeps you active. But, we like to fish down at Boca Grande where we go. We tarpon fish, we snook fish. So between playing golf and fishing, I think that's some of the best things you can do to relax in the off season.
Couldn't agree more.
Yeah, absolutely. So, and between the two of us, we both do that. Golan fishes and I play golf. So it works out fine. I'm curious, as you begin another season, and I've got all these stats in front of me, you're a heavy favorite in 10 of 12 games, and favorite in all of them. I'm just curious how different an offseason is. You're coming off now having played in the national championship game in consecutive years against the same team, and both of them, epic, classic games, one of which you hold on and win, and one of which you lose at the very end. Just how different, personally, is an offseason for you when you were reflecting on a heartbreaking loss versus a thrilling win in such similar games themselves? How different was this offseason for you?
Well, I don't think it's a lot of really that different for me as a coach, because you're always sort of self-analyzing, trying to figure out how you can improve, whether it's the organization, whether it's the individual player, whether it's your coaching staff. You're recruiting new players. You turn over about 25% of your team. You got people in new roles, whether it's leadership roles, whether it's opportunities to play, whether it's playing a different position. So I think that happens regardless of whether you win or lose. I do think, though, that it does affect the players to some degree. Guys being a little more hungry helps them to want to hunt a little more, work a little harder, maybe invest their time better, maybe practice a little more deliberately and with a little more passion and enthusiasm. So we've had a good off season, and the good teams around here have taken ownership and been accountable for whatever their role is on the team. And I think this summer has been good for us, and hopefully it'll carry over into the fall.
Overall, Coach, when kids play Little League football, you never know what a kid's going to turn into. He could change in size and shape. He could be one position one and the next another year, even through high school a bit. When they get to your level and the type of guys you get, and I coached the Under Armour high school game this year, and I saw some of your recruits from Dylan Moses, Alex Leatherwood, and just some of the great players that you get each year. By that level, even though they're not full-grown men just yet, by a year or two into their time with you, do you pretty much have a handle on what you have from these guys?
Well, I think every guy's a little different in how they develop. And I think a lot of it has with their maturity, their ability to learn, their ability to stay focused. Most guys have a little bit of an issue with, when the intensity level goes up a little bit in terms of the learning curve, the meetings, taking it to the field. Some guys have to learn how to do that, and some guys do it a little more quickly than others. But we know the critical factors that we look for in players, and when we get guys that have those, and some of the guys you mentioned certainly have those, we want to try to develop those guys to be the best players that they can be as fast as they can be. And I don't think there's any real timetable. Some guys play great when they're freshmen. Some guys develop into really good players in their second or third year. So you got to take each guy as an individual and coach them relative to what you need to do to help them be the best they can be.
Mike and Nick Saban, coach of Alabama. College football, a sport without a preseason. And for the last several years, and this year is no different, you open with a huge game opening against Florida State. We had Jimbo in here yesterday talking about it. What does a game like that do for you? What does it do for your team, for your preparation and everything else to have that huge opponent looming out there for you in your very first game in a neutral site?
Well, first of all, they have a great program. They've got a great team. They've got a lot of really good returning players, and Jimbo's done a fantastic job there. So it is every bit the challenge that you say it is. And I think it does things that affect your off season. I think your players are more focused. They work a little harder. They prepare a little better. They understand the challenge of the first game, and they're not really looking past that because it is such a huge challenge for them. I think it helps with fall camp in terms of your preparation. And certainly when you play the game, you really find out very quickly where you are as a team and some of the things that you need to work on because you're playing against some really good competition. So there's a lot to be said for that. I kind of enjoy playing in these kind of games. The challenges of them are great. And I think it prepares you really well for some of the tough games you have in your conference down the road as well.
And along those lines, we asked Jimbo about his quarterback in Francois, about the next step for him, and I'll ask you about Jalen Hurts' plays last year. We all saw the potential of what he has. For him from last year to this year, in your estimation, where's the biggest jump in improvement you need to see out of him?
Well, I think the goal in the offseason for Jalen was all about becoming a more efficient and effective, consistent passer. And that's not that he couldn't do it a year ago. I think we were a little hesitant and a little risk averse in how we tried to develop him and what we asked him to do in that role. And he certainly did a fantastic job for us and made a lot of plays in a lot of ways. But that's the one thing in this offseason that if we could create a little more balance by being a little more efficient in the passing game, I think that would help us be a better offensive team.
And final one from me, Coach. Again, Nick Saban with us, coach of Alabama, on his way up here to ESPN. He'll do a bunch of interviews here today. The expectations are so overwhelming on your program now, year in and year out. Can you give us a way that actually manifests itself? Like, how do you feel the weight of those expectations where anytime you lose a game, it is extraordinary news and something that no one expects? How do you feel those expectations?
Well, I think when people have high expectations and when they accomplish something and they expect to do it the next time and the next time and the next time, it can be a huge negative from the standpoint of your inability to minimize your anxiety that's created by that expectation, and then your inability to really focus on the process of things that you have to do to stay successful, keep climbing, trying to improve, trying to get better. So we'd rather not focus on the expectations that are all external to the program, but focus on the things that are internal to the program systematically that are going to help us develop our team, become a better team, help the individuals on our team to, improve and get better so we have the opportunity to be the best team that we can be. And that's how I try to manage it personally, but I also try to get our players to manage it that way. And not to focus on the expectation, but focus on what you have to do to be able to accomplish the things that you're capable of accomplishing.
Well, as the fly fishing rod gets put away and the whistle comes out, we look forward to another great season from you and your team, Coach. We look forward to talking to you down the way. We appreciate your time.
Thanks, Coach.
Thanks.
Oh, good. Thank you, guys. Enjoyed it.
It's Nick Saban with us, head coach, Alabama. 5 national championships. That's as many as all the rest of the coaches in Division I have combined. Urban won 1, Jimbo won 1, Dabo won 1. That's it. They're the only active coaches to have won. I should say Urban won 3, Dabo won 1, and Jimbo won 1. That adds up to 5. That's how many Nick has.
And it really, you talk about expectations. When you go there, even the young men who commit to these big schools now, they know where they're going and they know the expectation. So as I mentioned, the couple of players that I coach in this Under Armour game, from a Dylan Moses, a linebacker, Alex Leatherwood, a offensive lineman, and there was a great wide receiver. I think it was Jerry Jeudy, one of the a wide receiver. When you see these guys and see the physical specimens that I saw there of guys going to Bama or Clemson or any of the other schools out there, they know the expectations. And then what Nick Saban does at practice, in the competition at practice, and how he works it to, you have to focus so hard in practice, you basically don't worry about the expectations. That's born of what goes on in practice, that you get through that to the point where you're not making the mistakes so you can realize those expectations after you go through the grueling practices you go through.
How about this for a stat Hembo just sent me? Alabama has been ranked number 1 in the AP poll at some point in each of the last 9 seasons. 9 seasons consecutively. Like I've said it before, it doesn't make any difference whether you love him, hate him, root for him, root against him. He's the best coach in college football history. He's number 1. He has the best program, and when you take everything into account, the number 1 program in the history of college football, based upon the landscape of the sport now and what it was when the other coaches who you might put in that discussion were doing their thing.
Okay, keep your eyes closed.
Okay.
I want to show you my first ever painting.
All right.
Okay. Open your eyes.
Oh, that's a lot of colors and shapes.
So be honest. What do you think?
Well, I like how if you switch to Geico, you could save hundreds of dollars on car insurance.
Oh, yeah, that's true.
Yeah. Here, why don't I hold your paintbrush while you call them?
Geico, because saving 15% or more on car insurance is always a great answer.
Yesterday at roughly this time, I think it was, I retold the story about
the sleeping bag,
the kid, and who
fused himself to a hefty bag.
Still can't find. I put out a request if he's out there, if someone knows him or knows who he is, let me know. I'd love to find out whatever happened with that, but I didn't get any communication. There's a story that I've never told on the air that just reminded me of because of this kid getting dropped off at training camp
by his mom.
So obviously I never went to training camp in anything.
No, you did not.
I hope my mother's not watching or listening right now. But
Are
my
you going
kids
to embarrass your mother?
Not really.
All right.
So my brother and I used to play baseball up in the mountains. We had a house in the Pocono Mountains where we'd spend the summers. And my brother and I played baseball. And we
just went out and played and had fun around.
No, we were like in a league. Okay. It was like its own little league up there. It wasn't like little league.
Little league baseball?
It wasn't like official little league. It was just all the kids who lived there. We had a league. Yeah, we played baseball.
Were you good?
I was okay.
Were you a player or a bat boy?
No, I was a player.
Oh, okay.
I was a middle infielder, played a little second base.
Really?
Yeah, batted early in the lineup. Yeah.
Really?
Yeah, I was not a bad baseball
player.
Wow. For the stand. I mean, I'm talking about when I was like 12.
Kind of tells you about the team.
So I got a younger brother. He's 4 years younger than me. Swear on my life, there's a true story. My kids think it's the funniest thing that ever happened. So we would all get dropped off by our moms and picked up by our moms at the end of practice. So one day, at the end of baseball, I don't even remember if we had played a game or if it was a practice. It's pouring rain. I mean, monsoon-like rain. And everyone is getting picked up. All the kids are getting picked up. And my brother and I are just standing there in the pouring rain. And where the hell is Mom? We're upset that we're getting rained on, and we're embarrassed that we're standing there in the rain.
So you're cussing Mom standing there.
Well, we're like, where the heck is Mom?
Not what you said before.
We had a convertible at the time, and my mother, it got stuck, and she could not get the top up on the convertible. So that explained her being late because she was trying to get it up, get the top on. And so finally, in front of all of my friends, in front of everybody that we knew, up comes driving my mother in a convertible with the top down. I mean, just a pouring rain directly on her. And my brother and I look at her and we're like, where were you and why is the top down? And she yelled and I go, just shut up and get in the car. And so we got in the car and we drove home in front of all of my friends in a pouring rainstorm with the top fully down, like the old school, not a sunroof.
No.
This is like 1979.
Top down.
Full on convertible, top fully down and just completely exposed to the pouring rain.
That's a nice mom because I wouldn't have picked you up.
Well, was you going to leave us there?
Yes, I would have waited till I found another way to get there.
Well, there was no Uber then, and this is a place without subways.
Did you know other people there? Did she know other people? Maybe she could have said,
but there were no cell phones then, so there was no way of letting anybody know.
You'd have been standing there a long time.
Hey, Marge,
was this a bad part of town? This is a Poconos where y'all vacation.
There was no bad
I got
part
to
of
imagine you were in an okay area.
Yeah, we were
Your
safe.
Your butt would have been standing there. I'd have thought you'd be smart enough to find a tree to stand underneath.
We're standing in the rain.
Stand under a tree.
Well, they tell you in a rainstorm not to stand under a tree.
No, lightning. Was there lightning?
Oh, there was.
Oh, now you're making it up.
I don't remember if there was lightning or not.
Now you're making it up.
I don't remember if there being lightning.
You know what? I'm going to take the chance. You know what? Stand under a shorter tree. The taller trees will get hit first. Find a way to stay a little drier because I'm not coming if I can't get the top of the convertible up. There's no way.
Top down. Fully soaked.
She's a better person than me. Your butt would have been sitting there until I found another way to get there.
One other thing I wanted to read you before we call it a day was we mentioned about the idea that in previous generations, face-to-face discussions would take place, phone discussions would take place, and they don't take place now. Brian makes a good point when he writes, the funny part about the my generation did more face-to-face argument is that it implies that your generation had an alternative, which is to say we didn't have the option of texting or Snapchat or any of the other ways.
You had the phone.
And those would take place, but they're not even doing that now.
No, they're not.
So we had phones then. So I wonder if this stuff had been I remember asking you this about your father one time.
You don't know.
You guys would have been big celebrities.
You can only know how that person is. You asked about if my dad lived in the now, about the
would he be like a little closer to LeVar Ball?
I can only say how he was with his personality. I can't change that. So that's a fair point. It's a fair point. That's the only way to communicate was in person or by phone. Now you got people. What did Bickler say? That people break up by just not texting anymore.
Oh, yeah. They just ghost somebody.
Look at you.
Yeah.
You just ghost them.
Oh, I know about that.
Wow.
Oh, I know all about that.
Thought you were making a power reference.
No.
Never mind. No worries.
No, but they do. They just stop communication.
Yeah.
And at some point you figure out, I guess we're broken up now. But
it's amazing.
People have relationships in which they don't even see each other.
It's a fair point that there are other options now. And I guess my point is, why can't you do them both? But that's a fair point to make.
Yeah, look, I mean, all of my relationships in my childhood were imaginary, it's part and parcel to me the same thing.
So you never got a text back.
It's a distinction without a difference. See you tomorrow. Mike and Mike.